Power to the truth. This is Margo. This is Friday, November 30th, 2018. And today I'm going to start a new series. And I'll be doing a climate update in the next day or two. But this new series is as a result of one of my YouTube subscribers recommending that I check out this paper that was published in July of this year. And so I have to give a hats off to Phosphorus 72, who says, Margo, this may add some fuel to the fire as to your observations as well concerning rampant geoengineering. Have a read, would be interested to see what you also think. So when you click on that, here's the paper, and I've already got it up and blown up a little bit bigger so that we can read it. So thank you, Phosphorus 72, for this lead. The paper was amazing, and we're going to go over it today, and it's took me down lots and lots of rabbit holes. I mean, too many to even explain right here, and this is why it's going to be a series. And so this paper is, well, before I get started in that, I just want to preface the show today by saying I normally don't get into geoengineering or chemtrailing and stuff like that unless it's like really obvious in what I'm seeing, like in NASA Worldview. But you know, I have been following Dane Wigington for many years, and I had been witnessing the spraying and take pictures of it and this and that. But when I got started in just reporting on methane and sulfur dioxide, greenhouse gases this spring, you know, a lot of people were leaving me links to Dane's stuff underneath the videos, and they got kind of militant about it. And I know that people are passionate about this, and you know, it has to stop and it's harming us, and I don't disagree. I don't disagree. But coming on and being militant about it doesn't help matters any. And so that's why I kind of just cut things off. I said, you know, anyone leaving political comments and, you know, geoengineering comments, you know, they're not going to be approved, because I just don't want to. I don't want all the fallout from all the comments that people are going to be making, everyone arguing about it, because that's not what my channel is about. It's not about arguing, and it's not about being militant. It's about presenting information so that you can make a decision for yourself, and so that you can see the dots and help connect the dots. And hopefully I'm showing you my view of the dots, and if they make sense to you, fine, and if they don't, that's okay too. But this article and the original article goes into geoengineering. And I mean, the whole premise is geoengineering. And so I don't discount any of Dane's work. I think Dane Wigington has done phenomenal work, and you know, I support him 100%. And so I don't need a bunch of comments below, you know, with links to all of his latest stuff and, you know, getting militant about stuff. So I have to go where the evidence takes me, and I do believe that geoengineering is playing into abrupt climate change. And once you see this article and the series I'm going to be presenting, I think you'll see why I believe that as well. And it's not just geoengineering, but the the world military powers have all kinds of plans and ideas for how they want to control the planet, and they've been putting these plans and ideas into place for a very long time. And frankly, I don't know that we can do anything at this point. It's so late in the game, and it's been a covert operation, and it's a whole big rabbit hole, and it has to do with mind control and your health and all kinds of things that I really do think this is the end. I think we're at the end game, and what I'm going to be revealing in these next few videos is how the military has known about these things and has planned these things for decades. Now, I'm going to take you on a journey here, just a short journey as to how we're going to be reviewing this paper today. Now, here's the paper that came to me, and it was published in July of this year from the Journal of Geography, Environment, and Earth Science International. And here's all the information on it. And it's called 50 Years After: How to Wreck the Environment, Anthropogenic Extinction of Life on Earth. And so this paper is was written as a follow-up from an original chapter from a book that was written in 1968. And I'm just going to go down here. I'm just going to read you part of this abstract. 50 years ago, geoscientist Gordon J.F. MacDonald penned a book chapter entitled How to Wreck the Environment, in which he described how a nation might alter the environment so as to covertly inflict harm on an enemy nation. Our objective is to review MacDonald's suggestions of environmental warfare strategies in light of subsequent technological advancements and in the context of actual deployment of the war methods he described. Methods: we review the interdisciplinary, historical, scientific, and medical literature. Results: MacDonald discussed overt and covert weather warfare based upon seeding clouds to cause rainfall. Subsequently, a method was developed for inhibiting rainfall by jet emplacing pollution particulates where clouds form. For at least 2 decades, citizens have observed such particulate trails occurring with increasing frequency. Forensic scientific investigators implicate toxic coal fly ash as their main constituent. Around 2010, the aerial particulate spraying ramped up to a near-daily, near-global level. Presumably, a secret international agreement mandated the aerial spraying, as a sunshade for Earth. However, aerial spraying, rather than cooling, heats the atmosphere, retards Earth's heat loss, and causes global warming. MacDonald also discussed destroying atmospheric ozone and triggering earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, activities now possible with high-frequency ionospheric heaters. Conclusions: the U.S. military's ongoing decision to weaponize the environment for national security purposes was accurately forecasted by MacDonald. But he failed to realize that national militaries could and would be co-opted by a secret international agreement, the consequence of which, however unintentional, was to wage war on planet Earth, on all its biota, and on its natural biogeochemical processes. unless and until politicians, news media, scientists, and others in our society face the truth of what is happening before our very eyes and collectively demand a halt to these covert technological activities, we will march onward to the first anthropogenic-caused mass extinction. And so that's the abstract. And so what they're going to be referring to is a chapter from a book called Unless Peace Comes. And here it is. Unless Peace Comes, a scientific forecast of new weapons. And this book was published in July of 1968, and it was edited by Nigel Calder. And so he edited it, and Nigel Calder, he was from the UK, and he was a science writer, and he also wrote some of the chapters of the book, including the summary. And this is the chapter of the book from Gordon J.F. MacDonald from the United States on how to wreck the environment. And so here's a little bit, and I will be reading this chapter not today, it's going to be in the next video, but Professor MacDonald is Associate Director of the Institute of Geophysics and Planetary Physics at the University of California, Los Angeles. His researches have embraced a remarkable diversity of natural phenomena, and his professional interests are further extended by his participation in national science policy making. He is a member of President Johnson's Science Advisory Committee. So that's where he comes from. So, and now I'm just going to show you this book. It's available on Amazon. It's not in ebook form, but I did find these 48 pages that were scanned in on bard.eu library. And so I'm going to be reading these 48 pages to you from this book, Unless Peace Comes, a scientific forecast of new weapons, edited by Nigel Calder. He was ahead of his time, and I'm just going to go over the table of contents with you real quick. And each chapter was written by someone different. And there is an introduction by Abdus Salam from Pakistan. Conventional Warfare, Battlefields of the 1980s. Guerrilla Warfare, The Poor Man's Power. Nuclear Weapons 1, The Perils of Nuclear Proliferation. Nuclear Weapons 2, The Outlook for Nuclear Explosives. Aircraft, Missiles, and Spacecraft, Contests in the Sky. Computers in Warfare, The Strategic Calculators. Now remember, this was 1968, and that was right at the beginning of computers. Undersea Warfare, Militarized Oceans. Chemical Weapons, The Toxic Arsenal. Microbiological Weapons, The Infectious Dust Cloud. Self-controlling weapons, Robots on the March. Geophysical Warfare, How to Wreck the Environment. That's the one that we're referring to today. Implications 1, Fears of a Psychologist. Implications 2, We Have Been Here Before. And then the summary by Nigel Calder called The New Weapons. And so there's that. Here's the Nigel Calder page from Wikipedia. He was born on December the 2nd, 1931, and died at the age of 82 on June 25th of 2014. So you can read about him here and hear all of his works. So he was quite prolific. And I believe he had access to insider information and futuristic information, however it is, because when you read the Nigel Calder things, the way he talks and summarizes things, he's got a good handle on how things look today, and that was back a long time ago. So this article now that we're going into, 50 years after How to Wreck the Environment, Anthropogenic Extinction of Life on Earth. The authors of this article are J. Marvin Herndon, Mark Whiteside, and Ian Baldwin. They're all from the USA. This work was a joint effort between the authors that is a part of an ongoing collaboration aimed at providing scientific, medical, public, and environmental health implications and evidence related to the near-daily, near-global covert geoengineering activity. Author JMH designed the study. All authors contributed to the writing and read and approved the final manuscript. And here's the article information with the editors and the reviewers. And so this is a peer-reviewed article that went through this whole review process and was published on July 13th of this year. So I already read you the abstract, and if you want to email the corresponding author, it's mherndon@san.rr.com. So I'm going to read the whole thing as long as it takes. So sit back. Introduction. The politically powerful geoscientist Gordon J.F. MacDonald, born 1929 and died 2002, wrote an influential essay titled How to Wreck the Environment that was published in 1968 in a book called Unless Peace Comes. At a time when the military's focus centered on nuclear warfare, MacDonald prophetically suggested, among future means of obtaining national objectives by force, one possibility hinges on man's ability to control and manipulate the environment of his planet. MacDonald, a top presidential science advisor and participant in national science policy discussions, was well qualified to address the subject of future environmental warfare possibilities. Much of what MacDonald predicted or speculated about has come to pass, not with the technology he described, but with potentially far more effective and devastating technology developed during the succeeding 50 years. As MacDonald noted in 1968, the key to geophysical warfare is the identification of the environmental instabilities to which the addition of a small amount of energy would release vastly greater amounts of energy. MacDonald discussed purposefully triggering instabilities in such large-scale natural systems as the weather, the climate, the oceans, and the human brain, including such phenomena as hurricanes, earthquakes, and tsunamis for use in warfare. He was aware considering the limitations of geophysical understanding, that one should also anticipate unforeseen adverse consequences that could arise from deliberately disturbing complex natural systems that have unknown tipping points. During the 50 years since MacDonald's landmark publication, the technology necessary for the weaponization of the environment has undergone major advances, well known to those who have funded the research. In tandem, the scientific undertaking of Earth's behavior has likewise undergone major advances over the last half-century. However, major new concepts in geophysics, such as those being developed by the military-industrial complex, have been typically ignored in the geoscience community for decades. It is not surprising, therefore, that deployment of radical environmental warfare technologies that alter fundamental natural processes of our planet is proceeding without scientific warning or full understanding of the underlying geodynamics and dangers such technologies pose to human and other life. For example, to be habitable, Earth must maintain a delicate energy balance by radiating into space essentially all of the energy it receives from the Sun and from its own intrinsic geophysical and anthropogenic energy sources. Since the late 1990s, there has been a well-organized effort orchestrated by the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, and others to promote the idea that anthropogenic greenhouse gases, predominantly carbon dioxide, are adversely affecting Earth's heat loss, causing global warming. To compensate, the IPCC repeatedly promotes the idea of engaging in future geoengineering, i.e. placing substances into the atmosphere to block a portion of sunlight. However, the IPCC has failed to acknowledge the possibility of military geoengineering being conducted with ever-increasing scope and range for decades, and that its primary consequence is not to cool Earth, but to cause global warming and climate chaos. Here we review some of the ideas expressed by MacDonald in How to Wreck the Environment in the light of subsequent technological developments. We also review evidence that environmentally destabilizing military technologies are being deployed on a global scale. Where applicable, we discuss potential risks to our planet and its biota that likely are underappreciated by those responsible. 2. Methods. We reviewed interdisciplinary historical, scientific, and medical literature. Three, results and discussion. The long-held dream of military planners to control the weather began to become reality with the discovery in 1946 that clouds, when seeded with silver iodide or dry ice, solid carbon dioxide, under appropriate circumstances, could result in rain or snow. MacDonald discussed that form of cloud seeding and its military potential both for causing rainfall to impede enemy ground operations and for covertly causing long-term drought by forcing clouds to release their moisture before they reached the targeted nation. These have been matters of serious concern to the U.S. military then and now. Weather became a weapon of war during the Vietnam War, when cloud seeding operations were conducted to extend the monsoon season over the Ho Chi Minh Trail to impede movement of supplies and troops, Operation Popeye. The U.S. military also seeded clouds approaching Cuba in an attempt to cause drought to spoil the sugarcane harvest. Seeding clouds to cause rain, as described by McDonald, was only the first step in weather manipulation. Subsequent research produced the technology to impede the fall of rain. For clouds to yield rain, tiny droplets need to nucleate and then coalesce to form drops sufficiently massive to fall to Earth. The technology for impeding rainfall is known from pollution investigations. A sufficiently large number of pollution particles dispersed into the region where clouds form poses impediments to the tiny droplets, blocking and keeping them from coalescing to become massive enough to fall as rain. Eventually, the moisture burden becomes unbearable, and clouds release their moisture in deluges. In the late 1990s, alert citizens became concerned about the aerial particulate trails that extended from horizon to horizon in the skies above them. With the passage of time, these aerial trails became more frequent, while at the same time the public was being misled that these were harmless contrails, ice crystals formed by exhaust vapor. By about 2010, the aerial spraying ramped up to a near-daily activity over much of the globe. Weather modification is a phenomenon limited in duration and geographical extent, whereas climate modification is necessarily global. The current near-daily, near-global aerial spraying seems to represent an attempt at climate modification, which McDonald also discussed, and likely involves weather modification activity as well. As McDonald noted, climate is primarily determined by the balance between the incoming short-wave radiation from the sun, principally light, and the loss of outgoing long-wave radiation, principally heat. He goes on to list the three factors that dominate this balance: sun's energy, Earth's atmospheric transparency to different forms of radiated energy, and Earth's surface characteristics. Alteration of any of the three can modify climate. Altering the sun's energy output is not technologically feasible even today, but there are various ways of effecting radiant energy transport through Earth's atmosphere. Among the possibilities mentioned by McDonald, albeit without specificity, is the idea of placing material into the upper atmosphere that would absorb either incoming light, thereby cooling the surface, or outgoing heat, thereby warming the surface. In speculating about such a possibility, McDonald noted, "At present we know too little about the paradoxical effects of warming and cooling, however, to tell what the outcomes might be. That statement is as true today as when published 50 years ago." The explanation of the behavior of material placed into the upper atmosphere, as stated by McDonald, is simplistic and incorrect. So too is the oft-repeated proposition by members. I'm going to show you these pictures in a minute. Of the geoscience community, who now discuss the possibility of placing material in the upper atmosphere to reflect a portion of sunlight back into space, sunshades for the Earth. As we discuss below, particles placed in the atmosphere exhibit behavior in response to incident radiation that is considerably more complex than described by MacDonald, as are their physical and chemical reactions in the atmosphere and at the Earth's surface. And here's figure 1, and here are pictures from around the world of the spraying. Here's the Eiffel Tower in France. This one is from Egypt. This he tells climate manipulation particulate trails clockwise from Upper Lead, Paris, France, then Karnak, Egypt. Okay, then this one is from London, England. This one is from Northern California, USA. This one is from Geneva, Switzerland at night, so you can see a trail at night over the moon. This one is from Yosemite, California, USA. And then this one is from Jaipur, I don't know how to say that, India. So you can see this is represented from lots of different countries worldwide. As noted above, the U.S. military has been engaged for decades in aerial spraying of particulates into the regions where clouds form to modify weather and for other reasons, such as to enhance communication systems associated with electromagnetic radiation programs. Aerial spraying appears to have become an international operation sometime around 2010 and is presumably based on a secret international agreement. As observed, climate modification activity must involve ipso facto the collaboration of multiple states. As figures 1 and 2 illustrate, diverse independent countries are involved. MacDonald advised that the key lesson of the Vietnam War's highly secret weather modification program, Project Popeye, was not its failure to alter the war's outcome, but that one can conduct covert operations using a new technology in a democracy without the knowledge of the people. So, let me just stop right there. Let me find that other picture. Here's figure 2 from NASA Worldview. This was taken from NASA Worldview from February 4th, 2016, showing a jet-laden particulate trails blanketing the air above the Republic of Cyprus, but nearly absent in surrounding regions. The Cyprus Environment Services Department, part of the Cyprus government, promised to investigate the aerial spraying following the February 2016 presentations made to the Parliamentary Environmental Committee, but to date there is no sign of an investigation. So you can see it's just hatch marks back and forth over the sea here. Now, I pulled up NASA Worldview for you, and I went back to February 4th, 2016, and those images, the hatch marks have all been erased. You can see the sea is totally clear here. So this picture on NASA Worldview that that is available to the public now has been altered, as you can see here. So let me pull this back. Hang on. I want to show this to you side by side, these pictures side by side. It's incredible. And I had been showing Robin Weston, we share research back and forth when we're when we were looking at the Arctic and the melting sea ice and everything, and I was showing things that had been taken out from morning to afternoon and this and that, and he was like, oh, they can't be altering it. I'm like, well, they are, because it's different from what I see in the morning than in the afternoon or from day to day. And so here you have it. Here's February 4th, 2016, and here's Cyprus, and it's this, everything else is the same in the image. You can see the white, the white here. You can see the clouds are all the same. The cloud patterns are the same, except it starts, you can see it starts being, it looks like they just photoshopped it and took the eraser and just took all this out, all these clouds out, and they took out this one, this squiggly thing here, which was probably a chemtrail, but the rest of the clouds are the same. It's incredible. So I just wanted to go ahead and share that with you. I know Robin is going to be reporting on that as well. So let me get this opened up again. So just because it's there one day, then doesn't mean it's going to be there the next day. So if you see a picture and it's incredible, you better get a picture of it. And if you see something on the internet, you better get a picture of it and save it on your computer and get a backup of it, just in case your computer gets wiped out, so that you've got it for future reference. In case of a possible secret international agreement to modify the climate, the presumption would be it was made to benefit humanity. However, as we show, its implementation is exacerbating the problem of global warming and causing climate chaos and adversely affecting the health of organisms, including humans. At face value, it would seem that the actual geophysical and biological consequences of such covert military operations would be inconsistent with an international program for the benefit of humankind, unless that secret international agreement or understanding was based on misrepresentations. If so, a strange dichotomy marks the subject of weather and climate modification, characterized by blatant contradiction between ends and means, intent and consequences. Well, the ends and, I'm going to interject, the ends and means is they're trying to kill the planet, and they're trying to kill all life on the planet. That's what I see. And it comes from the dark mind. And I know that people don't like me getting preachy here, but I can't help it sometimes. It's diabolical. It's satanic and diabolical what's happening. Science should be based upon truth, but improper administration and funding of science has corrupted science's integrity. Since 1989, the United Nations, the IPCC, has remained silent about the military aerial particulate spraying and failed to take into account its geophysical consequences in its climate models. At present, large-scale aerial particulate emplacement can only take place under the aegis of military entities, but there is a global effort to encourage governance that permits non-military entities such as universities and for-profit companies to also engage in climate intervention. What reason was given to national governments to get them to agree to become willing parties to near-daily, near-global aerial particulate spraying into the atmosphere? Few government leaders, politicians, and bureaucrats are trained in science. Had they been told that the aerial emplacements of particulates will act like a sunshade to cool Earth to compensate for alleged anthropogenic greenhouse gas global warming? If so, they have been conned into the greatest science-based scam ever perpetuated, cause global warming and climate chaos by daily aerial spraying, and then blame the warming result on anthropogenic greenhouse gases to undermine the authority of nation-states and erect new world governance structures to regulate anthropogenic transnational greenhouse gas emissions. 3.1. The real consequences of aerial particulate spraying. One of the original military purposes of aerial particulate dispersal into the regions where clouds form was to impede precipitation and to cause drought in an unfriendly country. Indeed, former Iranian President Mohammad Ahmadinejad accused Western countries of doing just that. Figure 2 shows particulate trails blanketing the Republic of Cyprus, whose citizens sought, so far unsuccessfully, an explanation from their government for the deliberate obscuring of their skies. We just looked at that. There is no information available to the public about the extent of weather warfare. Interestingly, covert environmental warfare was predicted by McDonald. Removing moisture from the atmosphere so that a nation dependent on water could be subjected to years of drought. The operation could be concealed by the statistical irregularity of the atmosphere. A nation possessing superior technology and environmental manipulation could damage an adversary without revealing its intent. Not only the adversary, but the aggressor nation's own citizens would be unaware. As noted, McDonald observed that one can conduct covert operations using a new technology in a democracy without the knowledge of the people. That's an important sentence, and you need to remember that. And they keep repeating that over and over. But that's an important sentence where the government will use new technology without the people knowing about it. And so that's what's been going on all along with us and the whole world. And it's bad, and it's the end. It's the end. It's all coming down. Okay, back to the article. Presumably, the use of readily available, inexpensive particulate matter was considered a practical necessity and was implemented without regard for its possible adverse health effects. We know this was done in Vietnam. The undisclosed international agreement for near-daily, near-global aerial spraying and its concomitant funding has allowed military entities to indiscriminately expose millions of uninformed citizens to the dispersed particulate matter day after day, year after year, inside their own sovereign countries. Moreover, the aerial spraying has been accompanied by a concerted disinformation campaign to mislead the public as well as the scientific community about its adverse health consequences. In the following subsections, we review various consequences of aerial spraying. And, once that gets in the air, it goes everywhere. It's not like you can put a fence up and it stops it. It's not going to be enclosed. It eventually gets mixed into the whole atmosphere and screws everything up. 3.1.1 Aerosolized particulate composition. The composition or compositions of the military aerial particulate sprayed into the atmosphere has long been a closely held secret. At the beginning of the 21st century, concerned scientists took samples of post-spraying rainwater and had them analyzed at commercial laboratories. Here's that picture again. Usually only an aluminum analysis was requested, occasionally both aluminum and barium, rarely aluminum, barium, and strontium. The presence of those elements in rainwater indicated to one of us, JMH, that the particulate matter sprayed into the atmosphere was capable of being rapidly leached by atmospheric water, elements partially extracted from the particulates into the water, like tea is made from tea leaves, just as the toxic waste product of industrial coal burning, coal fly ash, or CFA, is readily leached by water. By comparing laboratory CFA leachate with samples of post-spraying rainwater, we demonstrated that the aerosolized particulates are consistent with coal fly ash. We further showed that element ratios measured in post-spraying air-suspended dust collected outdoors and in matter brought down by snow and rain are consistent with similar ratios measured in CFA. Coal fly ash forms in the hot gases above the coal combustor. Typically, CFA forms as spheres 0.01 to 50 micrometers in diameter. And these are small. These are really small. I looked at micrometers and these are tiny. Readily available throughout the world at low cost, the fine grain size of this major industrial waste product means that little further processing is necessary before it is deployed in aerosolized form in the atmosphere. In a large portion, the toxic heavy metal and radioactive elements originally present in coal end up concentrated in CFA. Because of its toxicity, regulations in Western nations require CFA to be collected, usually trapped by electrostatic precipitators, rather than allowed to exit smokestacks. The circumstances of CFA formation are unlike circumstances found in the natural environment, except when coal deposits catch fire, condensing and accumulating in the hot gases above the combustor, where burning takes place. Because the chemical reactions during the formation of CFA are different from reactions usually found in nature, many of the elements present in CFA are capable of being partially extracted by exposure to moisture. For the military, this is advantageous since CFA aerial spray makes atmospheric water more electrically conductive because of the many dissolved ionized elements and thus more responsive to electromagnetic radiation. But for the humans, plants, and animals exposed to these toxins, the consequences are devastating. (3.1.2) public and environmental health concerns. Epidemiological investigations of particulate aerosol pollution in the same particle size range as CFA provide some guidance as to the adverse health effects of the particulate matter sprayed into the troposphere and lower stratosphere. Pollution particles in the size range of 2.5 parts per million are associated with morbidity and premature mortality, Alzheimer's disease, risk for cardiovascular disease, risk for stroke, lung cancer, lung inflammation and diabetes, decreased male fertility, reduced renal function in older males, onset of asthma, increased hospital admissions, and low birth weight. The adverse health consequences of aerosolized CFA are even more dire. Ambient air pollution contributes to the growing global burden of respiratory disease and lung cancer. Inhaled aerosolized CFA with its complement of carcinogens such as arsenic, chromium-6, and radionuclides settles deep in terminal airways and alveoli, where it remains and can pose risk for lung cancer. Spherical exogenous magnetite nanoparticles recently discovered in brain tissue of persons with dementia suggests an origin in the kind of air pollution produced by CFA, which is characterized by spherical particles. Iron oxides and aluminosilicates, primary components of CFA, are all found in the abnormal proteins that characterize Alzheimer's dementia, which leads to oxidative stress and chronic inflammation of brain tissue. Coal fly ash, when exposed to moisture or body fluids, releases numerous toxins, including aluminum in a chemically mobile form, which is an environmentally and biologically unnatural state. Chemically mobile aluminum is deadly to plants and trees as well as to amphibians. Aluminum is associated with neurological disorders and has been found in high levels in bees. I'm going to stop there for a minute. I think you're getting the picture that that the environment is so toxic. It is so toxic that this is just a slow death, and this has been going on for a long time, and all this bioaccumulates in the system. And so even if you're eating a healthy diet, even if you're eating organic, all that crap is coming down in the rainwater. It's in the soil. It's in the air. You cannot get rid of it. And if you're not eating organic, then you get all the pesticides, which makes it a double whammy. And so you try and purify your water. These are nanoparticles, and nothing can get out the nanoparticles of this crap. So no matter how clean you try to eat, or you clean your air, or you try to detox yourself, all you can do is lower the toxic load in your body to the point where maybe your immune system can kind of hold its own for a little while so that you can keep functioning. But eventually it all goes down. Eventually everything breaks down. The DNA can't replicate right. So you have damaged DNA creating damaged new cells and new tissues, and it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing, and it's more toxic every single day. And I became a green living coach. back in December, I got certified as a green living coach, and it's so hard. And I learned so much about how toxic the environment is and all the different things that we have to do just to kind of hold our own. And you know, it's no wonder that people are sick, that people are having you know, mental disorders. They're going off the handle. They're becoming violent. They're, you know, they can't remember things. And, you know, lots of young people are having early Alzheimer's disease. It's like early Alzheimer's. This is what it's from. And it's awful. And a lot of people just have these unexplained low-lying chronic conditions in their bodies that the doctors can't diagnose. They can't explain them. They it can't be treated. It's all from the breakdown of nature, of the way everything was intended to be. It's a total breakdown, and we were not intended to function in a world that's been being destroyed like this. It's being robotized. And once they get the robots and the AI in, they don't need the humans anymore. Then they can do whatever they want with the planet because they don't care. Okay, back to the article. 3.1.3 Thermal consequences of aerial particulate spraying. In addition to inhibiting rainfall by interfering with moisture droplet coalescence, particles sprayed into the troposphere and lower stratosphere reflect a portion of sunlight back into space. But a portion of the incident sunlight is absorbed by the particles as heat. That heat can be transferred to the atmosphere by molecular collisions or can be re-radiated in any direction and not returned to space. The aerosolized particulates also act to restrain infrared radiation loss from Earth's surface and thus become a source of atmospheric heating, global warming. I tell you, this paper is amazing. This is a peer-reviewed scientific paper outlining all of this. And, I mean, this is what I've been waiting for. And I really hope that a lot of climate scientists look at this and kind of get a different perspective on things and realize that, you know, it's so bad. We're so screwed that it's all from this covert thing anyway. Iron oxides, a significant component of CFA, absorb strongly in the ultraviolet range but reflect in the infrared range. Most of the airborne iron oxide particles absorbed in the continental outflows of anthropogenic origin in China consist of magnetite nanoparticles or iron-bearing particles in CFA. Oh, and I'm going to pause there. And remember, in my climate updates where I show methane and sulfur dioxide, it's in mass over China. It's in mass. It's just, and over Asia, especially the methane. It's like black, and the sulfur dioxide is red over China. So that's from, this is what they're talking. This is from. These are the greenhouse gases that are being released as a result of this other stuff too. Strongly light-absorbing aerosols such as CFA directly heat the atmosphere and indirectly reduce snow albedo by their warming effect. As the aerosolized particulates fall to Earth, especially in far northern and far southern regions, they change the albedo of the ice and snow, which allows more solar energy to be absorbed by Earth. This behavior, especially when considered in the context of near-daily, near-global aerosol spraying, clearly may contribute to global warming. Consequently, the thermal state of Earth is biased toward warming, the exact opposite of official claims for geoengineering. There are other consequences of atmospheric CFA particulate matter in the troposphere and lower stratosphere that further lead toward warming. For example, CFA particles can cause supercooled droplets of moisture high in the atmosphere to form ice crystals, which form cirrus clouds, whose effect is to retard Earth's infrared heat loss. Current levels of CFA emissions are estimated to contribute 0.1 to 0.6 weight per square meter of extra warming through their role in cirrus cloud formation. This estimate, however, does not take into account the massive quantities of CFA used in aerial particulate spraying. With all of the ocean concern expressed in the press and elsewhere about global warming, it seems inconceivable to us that political leaders would knowingly sign a secret international agreement that promotes global warming. The presumptive alternative is that political leaders were deceived into believing that they were agreeing to an activity that would cool the Earth, when in fact the net effect of the activities warm the Earth and will destroy life if permitted to persist. 3.1.4 Ozone Destruction. In 1968, MacDonald warned, more sudden, perhaps much briefer, but nonetheless disastrous effects are predictable if chemical and physical means were developed for attacking one of the natural constituents of the atmosphere, ozone. In their intervening years, such means have been developed and deployed. The chemical means are principally manifest in the form of aerosolized CFA. The physical means by radio frequency ionospheric heaters, or HAARP. It's also HAARP. Many assume that the protective ozone layer in the stratosphere is slowly recovering, primarily due to the international ban on chlorofluorocarbons, or CFCs, by the Montreal Protocol, and that the Antarctic ozone hole is slowly healing. However, it is coming to light that these assumptions may be wrong. There is new evidence for the continuous loss of ozone in the lower stratosphere. It is thought that a reduction in ozone in the tropical stratosphere, where most of the ozone is formed, leads to transport of this ozone-rich air to the mid-latitudes via the Brewer-Dobson circulation. I've been reporting on this. I've been showing that. Ozone column losses at high latitude are in the range of 6%. Previously, depletion of lower stratospheric ozone has been attributed to rapidly increasing anthropogenic and some natural, short-lived substances that contain chlorine or bromine. However, the aerosolized CFA used for climate modification, now conducted on a near-daily, near-global basis, places massive quantities of chlorine, bromine, fluorine, and iodine into the atmosphere, including highly radioactive nanoparticles. These are potential destroyers of ozone. There's a disquieting parallel for this ecosystem degradation. Despite strengthened mercury emission regulations, mercury measured in rainwater is increasing. As the upper troposphere has now been found to contain iodized particle-bound mercury, It is not unlikely that covert aerosolized CFA, which contains up to 2 micrograms per gram of mercury, is a major source of mercury pollution when sprayed into the atmosphere. Okay, let's look at this table, then we'll come back up. Range of halogen element compositions of CFA. Here's chlorine, 13 to 25,000. Bromine is 0.3 to 670. Fluorine is 0.4 to 624. And iodine is 0.1 to 200. And then table 2, comparison of ozone number density of 10 to the 9th power reduction during the 30-minute heating facility emitted high-power expolarization radio waves at 4.3 megahertz. I don't understand all of this, so someone who's scientifically minded will understand it. So, okay, we're coming back up here. In addition to the chemical destruction of stratospheric ozone, there are indications that high-frequency ionospheric heaters, now dispersed globally, may adversely affect stratospheric ozone. Russian scientists have discovered a new physical phenomenon of the decrease of the intensity of microwave emission from the mesosphere in the ozone line upon the modification of the ionosphere with high-power, high-frequency radio waves. The Sura facility for generation of high-power radio waves is located near the village of Vasilsursk in Russia. It has 190 megawatts effective radiated power transmitter and operated in 30-minute on, 30-minute off mode. Thermal radiation of the atmosphere in the ozone spectral line at a frequency of 110,836.04 megahertz decreased in intensity during the heating on portion of the cycle by an average of 10 plus or minus 2% over all sessions of measurements in March 2009, as shown in Table 2. So here's Table 2. I don't understand it. You know, I'm not a scientist, so maybe someone else can understand that better. 3.1.5 Turning the Environment Against Humanity. The Russian discovery may be a bellwether of severe problems to come. For 60 years, the U.S. and other major powers' militaries have conducted ionospheric modification experiments without regard for the integrity of the ozone layer or life in general, exploiting the ionosphere to serve multiple military ends, including communications with submarines, resource mapping and exploration, and weaponization of weather and climate. Now, let me back up. Resource mapping and exploration, this is how they map the ice, and they're mapping like the stuff underground, under the ice in the Antarctic, and how they map the ice in the Arctic. They're using is through satellite technology, and you know, the beams come down, and anyway, microwave technology and satellite technology, and that beaming is heating up the earth, and microwaves heat water, and wherever there's water, it's going to get heated up if you're going to get beamed. If you're beamed, it's going to heat up. In 1968, McDonald foresaw the possibility that in the future, the military might develop the means to trigger on-demand covert environmental modifications to cause floods, storms, droughts, earthquakes, and tidal waves. Although one would not expect an admission from the steeped in secrecy military, an email to then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton sent February 21, 2011 at 7:35 p.m. states, quote, 6.3 magnitude earthquake in Christchurch, New Zealand, and on cue, unquote. Emphasis added on the and on cue. The phrase and on cue seems to indicate that the time of a 6.3 magnitude earthquake in New Zealand was known in advance, presumably an indication that the earthquake was deliberately triggered. And I know Robin Westenra is going to be doing some reporting on this, so watch his blog for that. In 1997, Secretary of Defense William Cohen directly stated, "Others are engaging in an eco-type terrorism whereby they can alter the climate, set off earthquakes and volcanoes remotely through the use of electromagnetic waves. It's real, and that's the reason why we have to intensify our efforts." Okay, I'm going to stop there for a moment. If anyone has done any research into Tom Bearden, he was brilliant. Tom Bearden, he worked for the Army. He was retired military, and he wrote books on the scalar waves, and scalar energy, and talked all about how the scalar energy could be sent through the atmosphere to cause earthquakes and weather modification as well. But I encourage you to look up scalar waves and scalar technology and Tom Bearden. And that's what they're talking about, using all this stuff. 50 years ago, McDonald noted, "The enhanced low-frequency electrical oscillations in the Earth's ionosphere cavity relate to possible weapon systems through the little-understood aspect of brain physiology. No matter how deeply disturbing the thought of using the environment to manipulate behavior for national advantage is to some, the technology permitting such use will very probably develop within the next few decades. With ionospheric heater transmitters scattered throughout the world, that time may be close at hand, half a century after McDonald's forecast." Well, that's happening. That's happening. We're being mind controlled. We're being beamed and mind controlled with the cell phone towers and, the everything, Wi-Fi, and now with 5G coming in. Don't get me started on that. I'm going to have to do a whole thing on 5G. But we're not going to make it. We're just not going to make it. This world is not conducive to biological life anymore. 3.1.6 Extinction of life on Earth. Historically, the militaries of the world's major powers have exhibited little or no concern for the health of their own citizens when what they perceive as national security goals are at stake. During the 1950s and 60s, more than 100 nuclear devices were detonated above ground in Nevada, USA. Without being told of the potential health risks, thousands of military personnel were deliberately exposed to nuclear blasts, including war game maneuvers that took place directly beneath the atomic clouds. Nor were local residents clearly informed of the risks or provided with ways to immunize those risks. radioactive fallout occurred not only in the area near the nuclear blast, but as winds propelled the radioactive cloud across the United States, fallout occurred along the paths shown in Figure 3 that depended on local weather conditions. Now here's Figure 3. And you can see this black, this is the fallout, where the fallout went. Here is where they did the major part of the testing here, and then depending on the way the wind blew, it dispersed the nuclear clouds. And it was a lot of testing above ground. And the Trinity test, that was in New Mexico. That was above ground. That was the first atomic bomb test. And you can see it went all over the place. So even if you're on the East Coast, you could have gotten fallout from that. And this anyway. Atmospheric nuclear above-ground testing came to an end only as the result of public outcry over news reports that bomb-produced radioactive strontium-90 found in cow's milk posed dangers of being incorporated into the teeth and bones of infants and children especially. Now, more than a half-century later, the scientific community is mute about vast military experiments on such Earth systems as the climate, and the world's media are similarly mute. Yet the dangers of aerial particulate spraying and ionospheric heating activities, taken as a whole, may prove as serious as those once posed by atmospheric nuclear testing. If not stopped, these military experiments in our atmosphere pose a risk of extinction of life on Earth. Mass extinction, defined as when the Earth loses more than 3/4 of its species in a geologically short period of time, has happened only 5 times in the last 540 million years. Common features of the Big Five suggest that key synergies may involve unusual climate dynamics, atmospheric composition, and global ecological stressors that affect multiple lineages. Drizzo et al. Have asserted that in just the past 500 years, humans have triggered a wave of extinction, threat, and population declines already comparable in rate and magnitude with previous extinctions. Earth is now experiencing a huge wave of population declines and extirpations with cascading consequences on both ecosystem functioning and resources vital to modern civilization. A recent study, for example, documents an alarming decline, a 75% reduction in insect populations, biomass, over the past 3 decades in protected areas of Germany. The term biological annihilation has been used to highlight the current state of Earth's ongoing 6th Great Extinction. 3.1.7 Geophysical ignorance, arrogance, and secrecy. Earth's great extinctions correlate with epic volcanic phenomena called large igneous provents, or LIP. Earth's most extreme mass extinction at the end of the Permian, or Great Dying, 250 million years ago, coincided with the Siberian Traps lip, a massive outpouring of lava and intrusion of underground magma. The underground magma mixed with thick coal seams and this hot cold basalt mixture extruded at numerous surface locations, producing plumes of pyroclastic fly ash, soot, sulfate, and basaltic dust, which ascended to the upper atmosphere. This material was dispersed globally, and the resulting char deposits in Permian-aged rock have been found to be remarkably similar to modern coal fly ash. The Permian was characterized by high levels of carbon dioxide, methane gas, and rapid global warming to levels lethal to most living organisms. A period of deadly ultraviolet radiation stress during the Permian period may have resulted from depletion of stratospheric ozone by massive output of hydrothermal organohalogens from the vast Siberian Traps volcanism. The rifting that occurred east of the Urals 250 million years ago resulted in one of the world's largest petroleum and gas deposits, as shown in Figure 4. There is considerable frozen methane trapped in the permafrost in that extensive northern area. Anthropogenic global warming caused by the near-daily, near-global aerial particulate spraying poses a serious risk of massively thawing and releasing that entrapped methane to the atmosphere. The potential for another mass extinction event, should this happen, cannot be dismissed. And here's this map. And people who have been following my work are familiar with what we're looking at here. This is Norway. This is Russia up here, Siberia. Here's Novaya Zemlya. And we can see these red dots. These are where the hydrates are, the large hydrate deposits. Gas giants, these are the gas giants, and the purple diamonds are oil giants. So when they say gas giants, that's methane hydrates. Those are hydrates, and that's methane. And remember, we've been seeing the methane coming up in this Arctic Sea, in this Arctic Ocean, all around Novaya Zemlya. And when I show you the next climate update, you're going to flip out. It's red and black. Black is coming up out of the sea here. And remember that Novaya Zemlya is where Russia did all of their above ground and below ground nuclear testing during the Cold War, and there were about 250 nuclear tests that took place on Novaya Zemlya, including the largest above ground atomic bomb that was released, called the Tsar Bomba, which was, I think it was 50 megatons. It was the largest one over here. So in addition, that's all radioactive. And we remember, we've been seeing high methane being released out of this area when I show you cams. Okay, this says the relationship between major petroleum and natural gas production wells and the boundary of the Siberian traps indicated by the black line. Methane hydrate deposits currently locked in the permafrost within this extensive area upon melting pose a major catastrophe. Well, we're seeing it. It's coming up, and nobody's really talking about it. Nobody's really, I'm showing it, but the climate scientists aren't even talking about it. And it's winter time, and they're saying that, oh, the ice, it's getting cold, and the ice is supposed to hold it back, and it's coming up even worse than in the summertime. Okay, let's finish this up. This is running really long. Military activities aimed at manipulating Earth's environment by polluting the atmosphere with CFA and utilizing ionospheric heaters to cause earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and other undisclosed purposes are, we submit, causing great harm to life on Earth. One of the many tipping points the world's leading militaries are toying with involves Earth's global monsoon system, which directly impacts 2/3 of humanity, most of them in the global south. In scholarly discussions of the possible impacts of deliberate atmospheric aerosol climate management, it is widely recognized that the global monsoon system is imperfectly understood at present, that engaging in the deliberate alteration of the global climate regime could distort or upset the persistent overturning of the atmosphere over the tropics, with potentially grave implications for floods, droughts, and agriculture in Africa, China, India, and Southeast Asia. Well, we've seen awful floods in those areas, and it's going worldwide. It is doubtful that assent to a secret climate engineering scheme by elites in developing nations highly dependent on the natural functioning of the global monsoon system is fully informed assent. The military classifies information it considers important to the carrying out of its security and war objectives, one of which is combating climate change. The civilian world has no access to these secrets except at the highest and most specialized levels of government. The military regimes involved in executing the massive climate change program discussed in this paper are like the sorcerer's apprentice, presumptuous, acting in secret, and unwittingly arrogant. 4. Conclusions. The decision to alter the natural workings of our planet, to pollute the air we breathe, to disrupt natural climate, to weaponize natural geophysical processes, to disrupt the ionosphere that protects us from the sun's deadly electromagnetic radiation, and to mislead the public about the health risks involved was accurately forecast in 1968 by Gordon J.F. MacDonald in his essay aptly entitled How to Wreck the Environment. But MacDonald's vision was not 2020. He imagined that a nation would be able to develop military technology for the benefit of its own natural national interests, but failed to see the evolution of a planetary enemy and the resultant pressures on nation-states' militaries to act in planetary concert against the so-called enemy, climate change. MacDonald also failed to fully appreciate the negative impacts of the future environmental warfare technologies, including their impact on human and environmental health. 90% of the world's population now lives in areas with unhealthy air. Coal combustion products are the most important single contributor to this global air pollution, with exposure to the 2.5 parts per million particles that characterize coal fly ash, the leading environmental risk factor for all such deaths, 4.5 million in 2015. Air pollution disproportionately affects the young and the old and those with chronic illness. War trumps all humanity's other organized activities and involves not only life and death secrecy protocols, but distorts the openness of scientific discovery. The secret war on climate change is no exception to this rule. MacDonald did not realize half a century ago that the world's militaries could be co-opted by a secret international agreement to wage a first-ever war on the planetary Earth system, on all Earth's biota and fundamental biogeochemical processes, unless and until politicians, news media, scientists, and others in our society face the truth of what is happening before our very eyes and collectively demand a halt to these covert technological activities, we will march onward to the first anthropogenic caused mass extinction of life on Earth. Ethical statement. The authors hold that technical, scientific, medical, and public health representations made in the scientific literature in general, including this particular journal, should be and are truthful and accurate to the greatest extent possible, and should serve to the highest degree possible to protect the health and well-being of humanity and Earth's natural environment. Competing interests. Authors have declared that no competing interests exist. And then there are pages and pages and pages of references. There are like 94 references for this article that you can read. And then at the bottom it says, this is an open access article distributed under the terms of the Creative Commons Attribution License, which permits unrestricted use, distribution, and reproduction in any medium, provided the original work is properly cited. So share this. Hats off to these authors, Herndon, Whiteside, and Baldwin. These are brave, brave, brave individuals to put this out there. They're probably going to come under all kinds of attack. All kinds of attack. But they're telling the truth. This is part of the revealing in the end times. Part of the apocalypse and the revealing. And this is so our eyes can be opened even more, so that we can go forward and be not deceived about what's happening. I do believe we are in the end times. I really do believe we are. I believe time is short. My name is Margo, and until next time, I love you guys. God bless you. It's time to get your spiritual houses in order. Go in peace, and goodbye.